Om. 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Namaskar and a very good afternoon to all of you. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to today's Vimarsh talk by Ambassador Satish Chandra on the evaluation of Indus Water Treaty. Ambassador Chandra is the Vice Chairman of the VIF and distinguished diplomat who has served the nation for over 40 years in different capacities. A significant part of his career has been devoted to Pakistan, where he has served twice, and he's also been Joint Secretary dealing with Pakistan, and as the permanent representative to the UN in Geneva, he dealt with the CTBT, a very important issue between India and Pakistan at that time. He was posted to Pakistan as High Commissioner in the late 90s, a very turbulent period. He was involved in the setting up of the National Security Council Secretariat and its various structures after 99, and he was involved with the NSES for over 6 years. And during that period, he was also a member secretary of the Kargil Review Committee. And then the group of ministers report on the reforming of the national security system, which brought in many changes over the years. And he was involved with all those things very closely. He was also involved with the enunciation of India's nuclear doctrine in 2003, which is also in a way, at least partly, a Pakistan issue. So he has dealt with Pakistan for a very long time, and he has also dealt with India's neighbors. And at the VIF, he has been associated since its inception, and been guiding us on a number of issues, particularly on the neighborhood, on Pakistan, on nuclear issues, terrorism, and many more. But in all this, he has also been following the Indus Water Treaty and evaluating it for considerable time. In fact, there was under his leadership guidance in the NSCS way back in early 2000s, there was an examination of the Indus Water Treaty. That, to my mind, was the first examination, thorough examination that was done, and several recommendations were made. So he is well placed to talk about the Indus Water Treaty, in which now there is a huge public interest. There is a massive amount of discussion. Every day, papers are being written on the Indus Water Treaty, etc. So we thought that it will be a good idea that we use this platform and request him to talk about the Indus Water Treaty, tell us about what it is all about. And now that the government of India has taken a very bold and unprecedented step of keeping the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance, what does it mean? What does it mean for Pakistan? What does it mean for India? What does it mean for bilateral relations? What are its regional implications? And what are its implications, international implications for international relations? So this is something that I think India has never done before. Almost walking out of an agreement, and for good reasons, of course. But we are today in a new paradigm and uncharted environment, particularly after the Pahalgam attacks and Op Sindoor, and that is what really, after Pahalgam attack, this decision to keep the treaty in abeyance was taken. So it's directly linked with terrorism. Pakistan being a terror-sponsored state. So if Pakistan is a terror-sponsoring state, of course, the international community does not recognize that, but that doesn't take away from the actual fact. So what are the tasks before Indian diplomacy? Because in the international community, we will have to explain, what does this abeyance mean? Is it an abeyance? Are we going to redo the treaty with them? We had asked, last year, we had formally asked for a review of the treaty, which is allowed under the treaty articles, though there is no exit clause. But still, I think, to best of my knowledge, Pakistan did not respond. So abeyance means what? Are we holding it in abeyance only temporarily? Are we going to do new agreements, a new agreement with Pakistan, or what does it mean? And then if the international community asks us, so what is our narrative going to be? If Pakistan is as yet not seen as a terror-sponsoring state, then how will your narrative sell to them? So I think there are many questions which are to be addressed. But before that, I think it's also essential to know what exactly does this treaty is. Why was it, what were the circumstances under which it was negotiated? And most often people have said that it was a highly technical treaty. And Pakistan did use many of its provisions to actually come in the way of India's right to develop whatever infrastructure, etc., it could develop on the treaty. It also misused its dispute resolution mechanism time and again to buy time, to impede projects, etc., and of course also to build a narrative. So there are many aspects to this. So I thought there's nobody better than Ambassador Satish Chandra to talk about these issues. So may I request you to start with this?
Speak from you. Thank you very much, Arvind, for those very kind words. I would caution you to take his kind words about me with a pinch of salt, because we are very, very old friends, and the association now is 39 years plus. We worked together from 1986 to 89, and then later on in the NSCS also, virtually throughout my tenure, and we have been in close touch thereafter. So the kind words that he has said about me, he is a biased guy, so take it with a pinch of salt. It's a delight to be here to speak to you about the Indus Waters Treaty. And for starters, I'd like to say that what we did in terms of deciding to hold the treaty in abeyance was a masterstroke, and it can be a brahmastra in our dealings with Pakistan, perhaps even better than kinetic action. It is therefore fitting, I think, that the Vivekananda International Foundation has arranged this interaction so that we can assess the treaty and we can see what are the implications of it. I may mention, again as an aside, that Dr. Gupta and myself had gone on a visit to Turkey for interaction with my counterpart, in their National Security Council. And this is soon after the turn of this century. And amongst the many other things we discussed, we explained to them in some detail about not only the Indus Waters Treaty, but also about Falka, because Turkey is also an upper riparian vis-a-vis two other countries. They were astounded at the terms of this treaty, of the Indus Waters Treaty. And I don't know whether they were astounded at our generosity or our foolhardiness, but they were astounded, and he is a witness to that. Okay, now to get down to business. It may be a little boring, but I want to get into some details. And in order to give you a 360-degree appraisal of this agreement that we are into with Pakistan, I will split what I'm going to say into 5 broad sections. One is an appraisal of the Indus Basin itself. We must understand what it is. Second, an immediate but very serious issue that arose between India and Pakistan in 1948 on supply of water from India to Pakistan. Third is I will try very quickly to give you a flavor, and here I'm touching on dangerous ground, a flavor of how the negotiations were conducted with Pakistan with the mediation of the World Bank. It lasted over 8 years. Fourth, I will walk you through some of the terms of the treaty, an assessment, and the actual operation of the treaty. The point that Dr. Gupta mentioned, how has it worked? What are the problems that have arisen? That's very important. And finally, the implications. Okay, getting on to the Indus Basin, the VIF very kindly, for facility and reference, has put up behind me a visual presentation of what the Indus Basin is like. And as I speak, many of those things will come up, so it will facilitate your understanding of it. It's named rightly after the Indus River, which is the longest river in the Punjab. It's 1,800 miles. It has actually 2 major tributaries on the west, the Kabul and the Kurram rivers. It has an additional one which joins the Kabul River. These 2 come from Afghanistan. The other tributary is the Swat. It is not shown there. But these join the Indus on the western flank. And then the combined length of these 2 rivers is 700 miles. Then you have 5 other rivers, which in that order are Jhelum, Chenab, the Ravi, Beas, and Satluj. These last 3 are called the eastern rivers, and the Indus and the Jhelum and Chenab are the western rivers. The Kurram and all are out of the equation at the moment. In any case, the combined length of the other tributaries, the eastern tributaries of the Indus, is 2,800 miles. Water flow. Total water flow in the Indus Basin, mean annual flow, is 170 million acre feet, of which more than 50% is provided by the Indus alone. The other tributaries on the east provide the balance, 50%. The western rivers alone provide as much as 80% of the total flows. The eastern rivers, notably Ravi, Beas, and Satluj, is a little less than 20% actually. Okay, what is the size of the Indus Basin? You see it projected there. It's about 450,000 square miles, of which around 175,000 square miles, or 38% roughly, constitutes the Himalayan foothills. And that is from where the bulk of the water comes. The water doesn't come from the deserts of Sindh or the plains of the Punjab. The water comes from those Himalayan heights and the foothills. That is the main source of supply. The treaty actually provides us the eastern rivers essentially, which is 20% of the waters. Is that fair? And my answer is no, because in determining what is a fair share, you have to take into account several factors. I will name some of them and give you percentages. One is the basin area. Now, 13% of the basin is in Tibet and Afghanistan. 57% is Pakistan, which is Western Punjab and Sindh, essentially. And 30% is India. But there are other factors as well also. And those are population dependency. At the time of partition, 45% of the population at that point in time was from India. The cultivable area, which was 40%, and the length of river beds. That's why I told you initially what is the total riverbed area. And that comes to about 53.5%. Now, there are many experts who have commented on what is the right amount. There are some which are very eminent, like Ramaswamy Iyer, etc., with whom I have also worked, who said, no, units 20% is about fair. But there are many more other experts, including engineers and so on, who say it should be in excess of 40% on the basis of the statistics I have cited. And I go along, it should be at least 40%. One other fact, and then I'll get away from all this and get on to the immediate issue. You know, I think many of us in this room or in realize the position on the ground in 1947. The bulk of the irrigated area in the Indus basin was in then West Punjab, which went to Pakistan. It was highly irrigated. The Indian part had been neglected completely. And to give you statistics, there were 133 canal systems in West Punjab, 12 in India. Area irrigated in India was 3.8 million acres. Area irrigated in Pakistan was 19.5 million acres. And water utilization in India was about 8.8 million acre feet. In Pakistan, it was 64 million acre feet. The point to note, and Pakistan cries about it in another context, that, you know, we got a moth-eaten Pakistan, but they got the granary of India. This side was nothing. This is important in the subsequent discussion we will have on the negotiation of the treaty, but keep it in mind. One other thing I just wanted to mention, which is there in the map, but I failed to do so, is of these rivers, apart from the Kabul and Kuram, which come from Afghanistan, the Indus and the Sutlej rise in Tibet. The others rise in India. The other four are entirely India. Okay, now we come into, I mentioned the immediate developments and the problem that arose at the time of partition on water, which was a serious, very, very serious problem. And again, we have forgotten that. But even before I come to that as a prelude, and it is a truism, and I speak with some passion on this, because I was born in Lahore. I come from Multan. I come from the other side. And our families have experienced this. At the time of partition, leadership, particularly Nehru and Jinnah, had no clue of what they were getting in having a partition of this country. They certainly didn't factor in the refugee problem. That's another story. They certainly did not factor in the trade problems. They certainly did not factor in the evacuee issue. And water, they were clueless about that this is going to be a very major problem because you're cutting these rivers. The line boundary goes through these rivers. To hand it to Radcliffe, who is vilified probably rightly on more than one occasion, he saw this problem and he warned both Nehru and Jinnah. He said, the control points for water supply from India to Pakistan is at Madhopur on the Ravi and Firozpur on the Satluj. Firozpur is very close to the border. Madhopur is a little bit removed. And therefore, there should be some joint control. Please think about it. The responses were interesting, and I will just quote. Jinnah said that he would rather have, and now I'm quoting, Pakistani deserts than fertile fields watered by courtesy of Hindus. That is the language used by Jinnah. And Nehru, of course, said what India did with India's rivers was India's affair. In other words, they both told them, you just forget all this. Any case, this problem, the engineers, and I must say the engineers were much more clued up because they were dealing with this issue. In December 47, there was an agreement which was reached between the engineers of West Punjab and East Punjab. Incidentally, all these guys were very good friends amongst each other. And that's why in the earlier years, some decisions could go through rather smoothly and quickly. A decision was reached that status quo ante would be preserved on supply of water from these two headworks, which were supplying these waters to Pakistan, till April 1948. And before that, the arrangements would have to be renegotiated. Pakistan did not ask for an extension of this agreement, though they were reminded on 28th of March 1948 by East Punjab. And naturally, since they didn't come up for renegotiation, the East Punjab government held up the water from the Ravi. On Firozpur, there's another story. I won't get into it. It'll take the time. But it was held up at Madhopur. The supply and Lahore ran dry. And there was no water in the canals. Water coming through there. Pakistanis were livid. Nehru was livid. He fired up the East Punjab engineers for doing this. But actually, the engineers were right. What they were doing is putting on notice that supply of waters now is India's right. And within about a week or so, as I said, the engineers were good friends, and they got together in Simla, and they came to an agreement for restoration of supplies. This was within 7 to 10 days. The supplies were relatively small because these are winter season flows, and there was not much water, so you could hold it up. In any case, it was restored, and this agreement was sanctified by an inter-dominion agreement. Indian side led by Nehru, and the Pakistani side led by Ghulam Muhammad, who was then their finance minister. And it was a very cordial understanding, and the agreements are interesting, and I need to do this because it has relevance for what will follow subsequently. Restoration of supply more or less completely as before. There were some little things, but that is fine detail. I won't go into that here. Also, the engineers had agreed between themselves that they would pay royalty charges to India for supply of water. They will pay maintenance costs for the headworks that are being maintained, and they would also pay interest charges for the works that had been done on these structures. The engineers agreed, but at this meeting between Ghulam Muhammad and Prime Minister Nehru, there was a disagreement. Ghulam Muhammad said, no, we will agree to pay you the maintenance costs. On the others, we would like to discuss further, and those two were shelved. But there was an agreement at this meeting that though these were disputed amounts, the Prime Minister of India would tell Pakistan be deposited with the Reserve Bank of India and only released after the issue was settled. An even more important element of this agreement, and this is really critical and the crux of the issue. In this meeting, India agreed that East Punjab, they still used to call it East Punjab, would not suddenly hold waters. It would give Pakistan time to tap alternative sources. By the same token, West Punjab government recognized East Punjab governments, and I quote what is in that agreement, their natural anxiety to develop areas where water is scarce and which are underdeveloped in relation to parts of West Punjab. So in this agreement, it was a beautiful agreement. It was very cordial. There was no major controversy. It went through smoothly. Barely was the ink dry on this treaty that Pakistan tried to divert the Satluj upstream, which was damaging not only for them, but to us. We somehow got them to stop this activity, and that's another deal, but I won't go into it. What I want to mention is they also reneged on the payments to be made to the Reserve Bank of India. And by 1970, when this issue was settled, this is now 12 years later, there was an amount outstanding to the extent of 143 lakhs of rupees, which is actually not a very large amount. But Pakistan wasn't paying this. And even this settlement, which was finalized during the conclusion of the Indus Waters Treaty, and I'll come to that later also because there's another element, we waived aside royalty charges and we ultimately settled for 62 lakhs out of those 143 lakhs. So, moral of the story is, and please bear this in mind, that right up to the conclusion of the Indus Waters Treaty, not only were we depriving ourselves of the waters of the eastern rivers, a large element of that, but doing it virtually free and incurring expenses on behalf of Pakistan. Incidentally, the value of waters has been cited by extrapolation in the Indus Waters Treaty in terms that should Pakistan want the waters after the conclusion of the treaty, they would have to pay more than 3 million pounds per year for supply of those waters from the eastern rivers. That's beyond 70. So, I'm just telling you how we were constantly hurting ourselves unnecessarily for this ungrateful country. Okay. What did Pakistan do? And this has particular relevance to what is happening today. We talked this morning also. Narrative building. Arey yaar, this is a very old story. Pakistan is a natural storyteller, usually fibs and lies. So this 7 to 10 day curtailment of water, and that's why I brought it in. It lengthens the session. But why did I bring it in? Because the water supply was stopped between 7 to 10 days. What did Pakistan say, and kept saying for several years thereafter, incidentally, during the negotiations and internationally in white papers they brought out, etc., to get international sympathy and vilify India. So what did they say? Total lies. This was done during the critical sowing season. Sowing season started much later, not in the first week of April. cut off flow of all waters that went from India to Pakistan. Now, all waters are the 6 rivers. We had a capacity to cut off supply only on 2 for a very limited period of time. And the total amount of sowing area affected in Pakistan as a result of this cutoff, according to our chief negotiator, Mr. Gulati, was 6%. They said we cut off the supplies for 6 weeks. Now the international community bought this lock, stock and barrel, very much as what the international community is being bought out, is buying today. This narrative telling is natural for Pakistan, and I have throughout my career, Ranga is here, he'll bear me out on this. We've dealt with this country for many, many years. This storytelling is normal, and they'll tell you lies to your face also. It's natural, it's a DNA issue. Any case, short point that I want to end this area on is by mid-1949, Pakistan was calling for a trashing of the 1948 agreement concluded between Nehru and Ghulam Muhammad. And what it claimed that this agreement was signed under duress. I mean, this is more narrative telling. This is also it told it was done under duress. What did Pakistan say to us in bilaterals? We want a prior recognition of Pakistan's pre-existing as well as whatever are our future uses of water. And they proposed if we can't settle anything, let's go to the International Court of Justice. That was the Pakistan demand. What did Nehru say? And what he said has relevance how the negotiations went also in the Indus Waters Treaty. He took a very reasonable line. And this has been really the story of India, that we are empathetic, we are constructive. India contended what we should do is have a joint technical study, both countries, of water availability, requirements of the 2 countries of water, underdeveloped tracts, how they should be developed, and the engineering works that should be done to secure the waters for optimal benefit of both countries. This is what Nehru said. He was totally rebuffed. Okay. Now we come to the third element of what I'm going to. I may overstep a little. The third element, which is the World Bank mediated negotiations. And I will now, before I get into the nitty-gritty, and there are experts here who know this better than me, like Uttam sitting there. He's a noted expert, but now I will say something about this, and it is my belief that if nations do not learn from history, we have to relive that history. We took Kashmir to the UN. Was it necessary? The answer really is no, because Kashmir acceded to India like many other princely states. We were the stronger country. There was no compulsion on us. But we went, and what was the result? The result was that Pakistan was allowed to retain the fruits of aggression. What happened with the Indus Waters Treaty? This came later on. We were negotiating till 1960. Kashmir is history now, I mean, in that sense. Same story. We went to the World Bank. Why did we go to the World Bank? I will tell you how that happened. Was it necessary? We are the upper riparian. Which upper riparian does it? I told you what Pakistan's best friend, what their reactions to Dr. Gupta and myself was. Turkey is Arvind's first love, incidentally. He was posted there. so he's soft on Turkey. In any case, the point is, what was their reaction? They said, no, they were surprised. How could you do this? Why did we do it? Was it necessary? Does China come to us? So, utter stupidity which we do and keep doing. I don't understand it. Okay, now I'll come back to the topic. Actually, the involvement of the World Bank was triggered, in my view, by the seemingly accidental intervention of David E. Lilienthal. David E. Lilienthal was very deeply embedded into the US establishment. He was the former chairman of the Tennessee Valley Authority. He was also chairman of the American Atomic Energy Commission. So he was well knitted into it, and on an assignment with Colliers, he came to India and Pakistan. He was, as usual, we are all very hospitable people, both. He was given the red carpet treatment, and he went back and he gave an excellent report, very much along the lines, and that's why I spent some time on it, on what Nehru was saying. He proposed, and I'm doing a quote from somewhere on this, that the two countries should work out a program to jointly develop and jointly operate the Indus Basin river system, and perhaps the World Bank could use its good offices in the matter and offer finance also. Lovely bit. This was lapped up by Eugenie Black, who was the president of the World Bank at the time. It was blessed by the American government, etc. Black wrote to the Prime Minister of India and Pakistan and so on and so forth. He got the green signal, and he sent a letter then in November 1951, very built on the Lilienthal proposals. In fact, he said this is the essentials of the Lilienthal proposal, and he set out the following procedure, which is excellent. I mean, it seems very good. Made the following points. The basin has sufficient resources for all existing uses and future needs of both countries. They should be cooperatively developed. The basin should be viewed as one unit only, not separate portions. And matter should be resolved on a functional level, by experts like Uttam, etc., not by these wretched politicians, not on a political plane. And the procedure was lovely also. What was the procedure? Letter stated that a working party of engineers should be constituted, comprising a representative each from India, from Pakistan, and someone from the World Bank, who of course would not work as an arbitrator. He would just be an impartial advisor. Again, this was lapped up in India, and they had further discussions, and now you see where it takes you to over the next 4 months. These proposals were revised 4 months later in a new letter by Black to all of us, to India and Pakistan. This is a letter dated 13th March 1952. And he said that, after discussions, we have reached a common understanding on the following lines. Apart from having engineering studies and increasing supplies substantially, he says the two sides would be free to withdraw at any time, that is India and Pakistan, from the negotiations. But while this work is underway, neither side would take any action to diminish the supplies to the other for existing uses. What does this mean? It means that your agreement of 1949 is trashed immediately. Who is supplying water to whom? India is supplying water to Pakistan. And we have already written into the agreement that we will reduce supplies over time because we have to develop our own agriculture in India. This was changed. And further, the three principles that were set out in the earlier letters would only give broad framework for reference, and they would not be fixed terms of reference. So now you are gradually getting away from all the lovely things you said, and we accepted it. Now, I just have three quick observations. Starters, I think we should have walked out of any further negotiations at that point in time. We didn't. By treating India and Pakistan on a footing of equality, you're doing an injustice to India in terms of irrigation development in our country. The irrigation is all developed on that side. On this side, there is nothing. So your first order of priority in developing a framework should have been that, if you were really nationalistic. The question of, I've mentioned about progressive diminution, that is out of the window. And by saying that each side could walk out of the proposals, you're actually promoting Pakistan's obstructionist agenda. And now as I come into the treaty negotiations, I will demonstrate how that happened. Actually, as Mr. Gulati has pointed out in his magnus opus on the subject, on the Indus Waters Treaty, they wanted to confine discussions only to the utilization of the eastern rivers, not the western rivers. They did not address the issue as an engineering issue, and they showed a disinclination to participate in a task force jointly with the Indian side. Ultimately, what happened in those negotiations, each side was talking directly to the bank, not together as a team. And therefore, the World Bank, and this happened in 1953, that is maybe a year or two after the negotiations had started, the World Bank realized this is difficult going. These guys can't even talk to each other. They won't even come together. So they said, okay, let each side present its own proposals on how we go forward to develop the basin. And Gulati, if you read his book, it's a must read for anyone, that book, because he participated in the negotiations from the beginning to the end. And look at the Indian approach, look at the magnanimity of the Indian approach. I marvel at it. His proposal was that when we develop this basin in its more or less final form, we will irrigate 16.5 million acres of land in India. On the Pakistan side, we will do 33 million, double. On the Indian side, we will utilize 37 million acre feet of water. On the Pakistan side, 83 million acre feet. So he is already conceding that much more will be done on that side, not in terms of the increases, but in overall terms, because on our side, the proportion was much lower. Look at the Pakistani reaction. When they were asked to present a plan, firstly, they didn't do anything. Then they went on to say that our requirements, that is Pakistan's requirements, are 506 million acre feet of water. Now, the Indus Waters is carrying 170 million. Okay, assume this is said over drinks or something. I don't know where it was said. Let's get more serious about it. In terms of actual tapping of additional supplies, and this is formal, Pakistan said it should not be on an equal basis. It should be on a 10:1 basis in favor of Pakistan. Now, I've just said this, there are reams one could go on about, but what happened is that clearly there was an abandonment of the Lilienthal approach to it. It became individualistic. And the whole story then became one of deciding that let's separate the waters. That is the position taken by the World Bank. We are going to separate the rivers and deal with it in that fashion. Additionally, in that process, from a minimalist approach, the bank went to a maximalist approach, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. But they also wanted to make payments for replacement of supplies from the eastern rivers, which were going for building infrastructure work in the west, including canals and even dams. And they started making demands, which we conceded that we would pay money for development of infrastructure in Pakistan. And our chief negotiator, Gulati, and I'm amused really by what he admitted. And he says, we agreed to make these payments, not because there was any legal requirements, but on grounds of, and now I'm quoting the exact words from his book, justice, equity, and expediency. I'll leave it to you to decide what it is. And now I'll tell you what the maximalist plans, which the World Bank blessed and paid for. This was to build massive dams on the at Tarbila on the Indus, Mangala on the Jhelum, and to build 550 miles of link canals, several of which had the carrying capacity double of the Potomac in Washington. For those of you who've been there, you will realize it's not something very small. The amount that was agreed to be paid, actually more was paid subsequently. Uttam will know the exact figures, but I have taken it from Gulati's book, but subsequently more has happened in the few years after the Indus Waters Treaty. $1 billion, all of which, except $56 million, came to us for a dam on the Beas. 33 from USA, 23 from the World Bank. That is all. The balance $1 billion came from various donors. Incidentally, India donated or gave to the Indus Development Fund $175 million, which was the second largest donation after the US, which was about $450 or $500 million. The other donors were France, Germany, etc., World Bank, you go on that list. So that was another story. I may also mention, lest people think, if you look at the preamble to the Indus Waters Treaty, which makes out, cooperative spirit and all that sort of stuff, Gulati indicates that really the talks were highly acrimonious, and there were enormous problems that occurred all across the world. Okay, so this was just to give you a flavor of the Indus Waters. If you want the true story and the real facts with details, Indus Waters Treaty is what you should read by Gulati. Now let's get into the Indus Waters Treaty itself per se. That's the fourth element of what I'm going to say. It's a rather long treaty. It has over 102 pages, 12 articles, 8 annexures, several appendices, one or two of which I was seeing this morning, 79 paragraphs, signed by Prime Minister Nehru, Ayub Khan, and the Vice President of the bank, Mr. Iliffe. In purely financial terms, the treaty did not come cheap in terms of infrastructure. Gulati calculates that India spent $1 million, so did the bank, on the infrastructure to negotiate the treaty, because it meant doing it in Washington and keeping people there. And then, of course, the lobbying exercise, and he estimates that Pakistan spent $2 billion. Now, this is a clue why the Pakistani narrative is so good. We were talking of narratives. If you look at the list of the lobbyists they have in Washington, which is not new, when I was in Washington, Way back in the 70s also, they had rather fancy lobbyists. So they're very good at all this, and understandably, they spend the money on this. The preamble of the treaty, and now I'm going to go some of the articles, is totally misleading. It doesn't conform to reality on the ground. It suggests that it was concluded in furtherance of the desire of both India and Pakistan to attain the most complete and satisfactory utilization of these waters. It was India's intent, but it was certainly not that of Pakistan, which was sabotaging the optimal utilization, which was the desired end certainly that we had and Lilienthal had and the World Bank initially had. So that's baloney. Definitions. Article 1 is a definition article, and there are a number of definitions, probably in questions, answers we could take it, but suffice it to say, eastern waters are the Satluj, Beas, and Ravi. Western rivers, Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, and then it defines things which are very important: non-consumptive use, agricultural use, etc., which we can go into later. Articles 2 and 3 are almost mirror images. Almost, there are certain differences. Article 2 is really on the eastern rivers, which gives India more or less exclusive rights on the utilization of these waters. But I want to mention, our supply of water didn't stop to Pakistan from the eastern rivers in 1960. It continued for a transition period of 10 years, albeit with some diminutions. Till 1970, we were supplying water to Pakistan at a rate which was, and that's why I was looking at the appendices this morning to educate myself further. After 1970, should Pakistan want these waters, the rate fixed by the World Bank was $3 million per year. But from 1960 to 70, how much was it? I did a very rough calculation, which is probably inaccurate, but it was a much smaller figure, which did not probably exceed 100,000 pounds or 120,000 pounds. So for 10 years more, we kept supplying this to them. Now, Article 3 is provisions regarding Western rivers where we are denied uses, but there are some uses in all fairness which are permitted to us. There is, for instance, agricultural use, which is irrigation, essentially, because we were using it upstream in Kashmir, and that amount permitted, we can do it elsewhere as well, under the treaty, approximates to around 7 lakh acres of land for irrigation, which is there. And the supply of water, etc., is there. Hydropower generation, we are permitted under stringent conditionalities. We can run existing, and these is only for run-of-river plants. It comes under that category, but we are allowed storages which can also be used for this purpose, which is much more, which is 3.6 million acre feet. And as someone said earlier today, we have utilized 0.7 so far. I think 0.8 is coming into play shortly. There's some additional work that is there. So we have not utilized what we are permitted to utilize. And this incidentally has been a part of an ongoing exercise which Arvind had referred to earlier, that what we had recommended. Of course, I am a fundamentalist, as everyone who knows me at 83, one can be a fundamentalist. My view was to get away from the treaty, but short of that, because it's an unfair treaty, but short of that, we can do a lot. And this is what we had proposed to the government even in 2003-04. And I must say, both the NDA government and the UPA government, both the NSAs were wonderful people and very dear friends of mine. who were my bosses, they took it online, that we will build up our storages to the extent we can and utilize fully the eastern rivers, which were not being utilized, which was something which the NSCS learned because of our very close hook-in with the Indian Army during Prague. And they came and briefed us and we took it on board. I have seen photographs of what all is going to Pakistan. There is no need for anything to go. But these were deficiencies which were there, which were highlighted to the government. The government took it on board. The only thing is probably it wasn't done as quickly as it should have been. Hopefully things will improve. In any case, so that is Article 2. 3. 5 is the financial provisions where we were required to pay 62 million pounds, which translated to $175 million over a 10-year period for the works that I mentioned. And the article also has a thing about certain payments to be made to Pakistan if it asks for an extension. And that's where I got the 3 million pounds, which was hidden away in Appendix 3 of Annexure H or whatever it was. So that was that. Article 6, very important, which comes into play immediately, exchange of data. You're required to provide data. It's more onerous on us because we are the only ones who can provide data, because we are upper riparians. So we were required to provide that, and that is there. Article 8, very important, Permanent Indus Commission was set up. This commission comprised an engineer from their side and from our side, an expert. And this was really to oversee the treaty and to settle points or questions of difference which would arise and did arise from time to time. Article 9 is very crucial. Settlement of differences, disputes. And it lays down a very graded system. Whenever an issue arises between the two countries, arises in the commission. It is called a question. And the commissioners are expected to resolve that. If they cannot resolve it, in most cases, it goes to a neutral expert, or they may decide to have a court of arbitration. But usually these disputes are technical ones on what should be the height of the structures that you're building, etc., etc. If the neutral experts can't sort it, then it goes to the court of arbitration. But in any case, and this I want to underline because it is significant for what will follow, is that when a neutral expert is working on a job, it shouldn't go to a court of arbitration. Actually, Article 9(6) stipulates that. And also the parameters of what goes to a neutral experts are also spelled out. And when I spoke about what structures can be put on the western rivers, etc., there are very detailed guidelines. They are way beyond me, certainly. You need to be an engineer and a legal expert to understand that. And then, of course, the final provisions are there. And here again, this is a failing in the treaty because it did not have an end date. And it said that modifications or change in treaty can only be accomplished by a duly ratified fresh treaty. It's a Tawny arrangement. I don't know who thought about it. Now, I've said, and this is my view, there are many people who are better qualified than me to say it. I'm only a simple retired diplomat in old age. My views on the treaty, I think it's always felt it's been unfair to India. We only got 20%. We were entitled to 40%. We were required to finance, pay for it, $175 million. There was no need, no upper riparian does it. In fact, in 1895, the USA refused to curb the diversion of the Rio Grande, affecting flows into Mexico. No one bothered. This happens. What is China doing? You can't stop it. So I don't know why we should have paid. We can be generous, we can be good. We are giving them water. पानी तो दे रहे हैं हम, पर पैसा भी दे दो. Very onerous conditions, Arvind referred to it. Very onerous conditions on utilization. When we make the structures, the detail that the annexures, appendices have gone into is enormous. Of what will be the height of the spillways, whether or not the gates can be there, what level should be the gates, and on the working, I'll refer to that. In any case, let me also give you a flavor. It's not that Indians were dumb. Indians were aware of what had happened and were highly critical of the treaty at the time it was concluded. Several mainstream papers castigated government for making concessions after concessions and yielding to Pakistan wishes. A publication of the Ministry of Irrigation and Power, which was involved in negotiations, stated that the treaty not only required great patience and sacrifice on India's part, but involved a heavy gift of money and water supply from our rivers for a further period of 10 years, with both of which India could do well for herself in this crucial period of growth. Ashok Mehta called it a second partition of India. Harish Mathur asserted that India's development programs will be retarded. It's actually correct. And it is all to the advantage of Pakistan, also correct. And that India's over-generousness should not be at the cost of our own people and the cost of the development of this country, unquote. Those were the words he used. Nehru's defense, unconvincing, feeble. He admitted, we purchased a settlement, if you like. We purchased peace, and it's good for both countries. We saw 5 years later, Ranga reminded me of it earlier today in a message in another context. Proven wrong. You had the Kutch conflict. You had 1965 war. I mean, what peace? I think a lot of us understand that the treaty has not had a positive impact. But what we have not factored in is how badly it has affected us in delay of even the limited programs and projects that we had on the Western rivers. Now, I can tell you from my personal experience, a very relatively small project, it's across a length of about 20 kilometers downstream of Wular Lake, goes by the name of Tulbul Navigation Project, which was actually designed to just ensure that there is a regular water supply of a certain height, about 4, 8, 6 feet, something like that, for floating of timber and floating of boats, etc., downstream for navigation, enormous help to the local people rather than road transport, etc. It started in around 1984. I dealt with it through 1986, 89. It was in the composite dialogue process also. It never got solved, ever. It doesn't exist today, and Omar Abdullah rightly is saying. In fact, the Kashmiris are upset, rightly. If I was a Kashmiri, I'd be upset with this wretched treaty because their development has been hampered. So that Tulbul navigation project went by the stream. Sanal, hydroelectric project on Chenab. You know, this project has been wrecked because we had to negotiate with Pakistan constantly. So first they said you lower the height. It was supposed to be, spillways were supposed to be 40 feet. Lower it to 30 feet. It has gates at the base. These gates, incidentally, are necessary because you need to be in that area. There's a heavy silting. You need to flush a dam or a structure. It's not even a dam, it's a structure. You have to flush it constantly because otherwise it builds up, it damages the blades, etc., that function in the generation of power, etc. If you don't do it, you damage the plant. It's sluices have been blocked completely, and the generation of power has been affected. Kishan Ganga Hydro Project. This is really a diversion project. We divert the stream from one side into the Jhelum onto the other side, from one tributary to the other, Kishan Ganga into Jhelum. And it's a diversion project. Pakistan objected, took it to a court of arbitration. We won the case. They then took it to another court of arbitration. We objected. We said, if you have now another technical objection, let's go to a neutral expert. We are ready for that, though it's not necessary. Arbitration, ho gaya, chutti ho gayi, kabhi to khatam karo. No. We will go to a court of arbitration again. We said neutral expert, and look at the World Bank. I shouldn't be amazed because it's a multinational institution that is there very much like the UN. It referred in November 2016 this issue both to a court of arbitration and a neutral expert. Imagine if you get a differing opinion. And in fact, it recognized it in a press release, which I took a cutting out of, and I'm quoting. It acknowledged, and I'm quoting, that pursuing two concurrent processes under the treaty could make it unworkable over time. This is what the World Bank said in a press release. However, it has repeated the same exercise again recently. But before I come to that, the point really is that these moves are in violation of the treaty. And the World Bank saying it is a bystander and a neutral person is incorrect. It is supposed to work on annexures F and H, I think, which govern neutral expert and court of arbitration. So it has a role. It's not supposed to be neutral. If a party is doing wrong, it should tell them, look, we can't do this. But it's done it again, and I won't go because I'm overstepping my time. The short point I wanted to make on this is all our projects, and there are others which have got delayed by decades. Some have been abandoned like Tullu. That is how the treaty has been operated in a manner that is really unsatisfactory. Now, I just want to point out, between January 23 and August 24, we have written to Pakistan on as many as 4 occasions to initiate talks on revising the treaty because of this complication on dispute settlement, and have received no satisfactory response. Actually, initially, we only wrote about our concerns about the dispute settlement mechanism. I think the first 2 communications were on that. But later, our concerns became wider because I think wiser counsels in India prevailed. And we listed a number of other concerns which now require a modification of the treaty. And the concerns listed were population demographics, environmental issues, and impact of persistent cross-border terrorism. That entered the scene even by August 2024, well before Pahalgam. A 5th communication, of course, was sent on 24th April, after the Pahalgam attacks, which we formally conveyed India's declaration, and I think the language is brilliant. I could not better it as a diplomat. I think it's been done excellently. Treaty will be held, and I'm quoting, in abeyance until Pakistan credibly and irrevocably abjures its support for cross-border terrorism. I would just like to say, finally, on the implications, the last bit. I'm sorry if I'm keeping you long, but I think it is necessary. Point is, we couldn't get out of this treaty because you can't agree to anything with Pakistan. And there were really 2 options which we had. Number 1 is, under international law, there is a simple principle that if the fundamental circumstances prevailing at the time when the treaty was signed change so drastically that the treaty itself is jeopardized, you can get out of it. So in situations like near war, we can do it. And the second option really is what we did. And I think what we did is a better option, in my view, rather than what I had been earlier suggesting is that let's walk out of it. And the reason is it minimizes the success of adversarial litigation, since it holds out the possibility of a revival of the treaty dependent upon Pakistan's good behavior. It also has the great advantage of being time elastic. It can be indefinite, actually. And what are the benefits that accrue? And I will just quickly end by listing these. India will no longer face design or operational restrictions for its projects on Indus waters. And over the long term, we can completely overcome both water and power scarcity across northern India. We will now be able to freely create storages on the western rivers, unconstrained by Pakistan's objections. We are not required now to share water flow data, which means Pakistan will have problems willy-nilly in terms of planning, flood forecasting, less supply, etc. There will be problems. We will be able to revive our projects like Salal. I think something has been done already in terms of reservoir flushing, Kishanganga also, other projects which would lead to their better operation and life enhancement. Inspection visits of Pakistan engineers will not happen. Permanent Indus Commission will now be in a state of suspension, as will third-party dispute settlement mechanism, because they are not there. And I did not mention, because of paucity of time, that we are no longer participating with the Court of Arbitration any longer. In fact, we consider it to be illegal. While over the medium and long term, we will be able to create serious water shortages in Pakistan. In the short term, this will be only at a very marginal level. But nevertheless, Pakistan is a very water scarce country. Anything will hurt. And there are projects which can be got off the ground, like for instance, the expansion of the Ranbir and Pratap canals in Kashmir. The old canals, but already this is being mooted. Omar Abdullah also mentioned about the Turbul navigation project. I will not touch on narrative building, Arvind, because I think we have overstepped time. Excuse me.
So, thank you very much, sir. You all heard a brilliant, it's almost a complete presentation on IWT. I mean, if you're short of reading Uttam's book, if you want to read in 45 minutes a podcast, or I think this is the best presentation that one could have heard. I think all the aspects have been covered. One aspect could be, how do you think the international community will react to this, and how does it going forward? I mean, one thing that comes to my mind is that Pakistan over the decades has built this narrative that India did not agree to the plebiscite. And then we keep on explaining that, you know, this is part 1, 2, 3 of those resolutions, etc. And now we may have another thing coming, you know, a task for our diplomacy, where we'll have to explain as to why we almost abandoned the treaty. Anyhow, but these are many issues that might arise. But I open this now for any questions, comments. Yes, please. Kindly keep yourself brief, because we'll have a lot of questions and we have limited time.
Yes, sir. I'm Mangi Agarwal, teacher for life. I want to find out the implication.
But-
Can you speak a little louder? Oh, okay, okay, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
A Chinese aspect. How could China affect all these things? Whatever India has done in the past, it looks foolish, whatever they have. But nonetheless, looking at the future, we have to worry about China also if we do anything about that aspect.
Couple of questions will take so that, yeah. Yes, Suresh. Okay. Okay. There, Anurag.
Thank you, sir. Captain Hussain. Sir, can we put an economic value on the losses that Pakistan will suffer, since the treaty has been put in abeyance, sir? The question is, would it sufficiently deter Pakistan for them to fall in line, sir? And the second part of the question is, you mentioned that what gains that we accrue from the abeyance, sir. Do they have any leverages that they can, act against us? Thank you, sir.
Maybe one or two more. Yeah, please. Yeah. And then after that,
We have been seeing press reports that post this holding back the Indus water treaty by India, China has jumped straight into building dams in Pakistan as if they were waiting just for this opportunity. Is it in our expectation that this would have happened? And will this affect the holding back the Indus Water Treaty for too long?
there. Closer to them.
Sir, my name is Satya Vijay. As you told that initially the proposal was for 5 years and expenditure was 550 and 60 crore. Later on, this proposal was extended for 10 years and agreement happened for 10 years. What was the reason for extension for 10 years? My another question, you already talked about the Article 9, which is very crucial, this Indus Water Treaty. Sir, what is the role at present scenario of the World Bank or arbitration of court? Thank you, sir.
One question there at the end.
Good evening, sir. Slightly off topic, but can you shed some light on the lobbying process that's involved in the lobbying process?
Lobbying process. Okay, maybe you could take a few questions and then I'll come to
Okay,
the
let's start with the Chinese concern. There were 2-3 people who spoke about this. This has often been cited. In fact, in some earlier discussion also, it said, if we do this, China will do something on the Brahmaputra, which China has always been doing it. It's not bothered. What you do or what you don't do is not going to affect what China will do. Also on the Brahmaputra, my understanding is, and I may not be completely right, but I have spoken to people, what they are doing on the Brahmaputra is something massive and very dangerous. But a lot of our water supply on the Brahmaputra comes from other areas also in the region. So we will not be that badly affected unless there is a disaster. But this is a question on water experts as to what they will do. But irrespective of what India does, China will do whatever it wishes to. It does. And this dam is not new. I remember 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, 23, 24 years ago, I had seen reports when I was in the NSCS that China was doing precisely this dam, some work on it. And I had raised it with the Ministry of External Affairs, and they said, there is this, we've raised it, this is in planning stage. मैंने कहा ये कुछ तो हो रहा है, इसे अभी तक तो कुछ नहीं हो रहा. No, China तो वो करेगा. So I don't do this. But the question of making dams in Pakistan, they will do what again China will do. It really doesn't bother us. So long as the overflow from the dam doesn't come to us. Because in the catchment areas, if there is some backflows, etc., it could affect us. This happens sometimes. But they may or may not build dams in Pakistan. That's okay. Point is, if there's no water, what will the dams hold? But to be realistic, we cannot decrease supplies drastically because we don't have the storage. And Pakistan, in its narrative building, anytime it's a given, anytime there is either a shortage or a flood, they will blame you. I think we need to take this blames in our stride. They'll blame you in any case. They accuse you of terrorism in Pakistan. Also, Jafar Express was done by India, according to them. So, I mean, you know, this is a non-serious country, actually. What we should do is to have a very strong narrative on what we propose to do with the treaty. And we were discussing this earlier today at another forum. And that is why I said I was critical of what I had proposed myself, that we should get out of the treaty. I think the present language is much better than what I was thinking of earlier myself. I mean, my approach was a Punjabi approach. Excuse that. I can say it since I'm a Punjabi. It was a very straightforward approach. I think what we need to do is having a much more nuanced approach. Ranga, as a Tamil, appreciates that one. We should have a nuanced approach, and the government's approach is nuanced. It is also time elastic. You don't know how long it will continue. We could say Pakistan plays ball and provides credible and irrevocable evidence that it's going to stop cross-border terrorism. Fine, we'll start business as usual. But if they don't, and we are the judges, how can anyone blame you? This, your answer, this is a very superior and sophisticated approach. I found it very attractive because, but coming back again, in legal terms, and you were present, Arvind, that's why we made that proposal. Actually, he is responsible for much of this. He got an internationally well-acclaimed Indian expert, legal expert, who guided us onto our approach. It was in my room over a lunch, I think, who told us that you are on a very strong footing to get out of this treaty on grounds of terrorism, and he went into the legalities of it. Because under international law, I didn't have time to dwell on it, I had planned to. Under international law, there is a very well-known thing called rebus sic stantibus, and my Latin is bad, which means what I had said in plain English, that if circumstances change, you can get out of a treaty, and that is the antidote actually to pacta sunt servanda, which means that you should observe treaties. Yes, that is the normal rule. But that normal rule, jahan वो booty hoti hai, uske liye palak bhi saath hota hai. So that is the thing that you can get out of this whole thing if you want to. So that aspect is there. You got it wrong. Transition was never 5 years. Transition period was 10 years. Amount payable was 162.5 million pounds or something like that, which translated to $175 million. That is the transition period for the Indus Waters Treaty. And it lasted from 60 to 70. It had an extension framework of 3 years for certain elements of the treaty. World Bank role, it's been mischievous. How can you do stupid things like what they did? And I think that in itself was a very good excuse for us to have got out of the treaty, because the dispute settlement mechanism has been wrecked by the bank. It's black and white in my thinking. Deterring Pakistan, leverages, I don't think they have too many leverages. You know, Pakistan has always done its worst vis-a-vis India, and it will continue to do so. I don't think anyone can quantify what their losses will be. I would say that at least, and this is my hope and expectation, at the end stage, I don't think it is our intent to cut off our capacity even for decades and decades and decades to cut off all water to Pakistan. But I think it should be our intent to at least get 40% of our share of the waters. Should you do that, Pakistan will be severely compromised.
The last round, Prabhat, and then there. आप तो पूछ लिए sir.
Thank you, Satish ji. That was a really brilliant presentation, comprehensive and totally accessible. Two points. One, even though I'm a Lucknowi, I still adhere to the what you call the Punjabi approach. I would have wanted us, and I still believe the right approach would have been to denounce the treaty. And I'll give you my reason. The reason is that, firstly, there is no legal structure called in abeyance. You either denounce it or you observe it. But more important, whenever the abeyance period ends, you are still tied to the same old treaty, which you have so comprehensively shown to be very harmful to our interests. A denunciation would mean you could begin de novo, and that is where you could get your 40%. So that's my Lucknowi understanding of how we should have approached this. Taking you a little off topic, but something again which you would certainly know a lot about. This reduction, it also fits into this pattern of our taking sort of half measures. This itself is a half measure, and then we've left 30 of the ISI scoundrels in their high commission in Delhi. I've always worked with the number 3, and number 3 I said would be adequate for visa purposes, consular purposes. Now we have no exchange of people, either no visits. So to my mind, the correct number now is 0. But as a former High Commissioner, what is your view on the ideal number that we need to have? My assessment has always been that we are under much more pressure, our diplomats, than their diplomats over here. And so really, there's very little that they can do, the 30 that are left there, or the 3, hence 0. Your comments, please. Thank you.
Take you.
Thank you. I'm Anil Honda. On abeyance itself, some working must have been done. And what do you think that the geopolitical situation, if at all it changes to abeyance, as already mentioned, that the legal sanctity for abeyance is not exactly there. And where and how would you like to use that future?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful exposition and impressive too, as usual. My question is, sir, though we may not able to hold the water, but we can always put a cycle to it. Hold, leave, and that can affect their irrigation. That can affect lot many things. One. Number 2, such kind of inconsistency in water flow can cause civil rights and other issues in the city, and hopefully that can teach bit of lesson, if not too much of lesson, to the country. Your views?
Yeah, there. Go ahead.
Sir, in the current scheme of things, what if there's a player like the US who comes in and tries to take credit or put pressure? And secondly, in such a case, do you actually think any international pressure being put on India to maybe change its stance or maybe deal with the entire situation at hand? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, there. Pradeep?
Thank you, sir. Pradeep Gupta, one question that as we have decided to have the bilateral level issues only, can we explore possibility of eliminating World Bank role in this? Number one, it was done long ago when our conditions were not so good. And second thing that what you have rightly told that 40% share or maybe 50%, whatever is due to us. And Honorable Prime Minister has also mentioned that हमारे हिस्से का पानी नहीं जाएगा वहाँ पे. So whatever is hissa is to be decided by the expert like you all. So how much time would we take to develop that capacity and funds? And we should appeal to the nation, I mean, whole country, that if we are having shortage of funds, we should pool and come up with the facility eliminating World Bank or any other, because external funding will be a big choke point for us in this particular thing, because certain villains like Pakistan and other cohorts of them will try to sabotage things.
Okay, so, yeah, please. Okay. No, bring it to an end.
A very unusual suggestion was given to me by an archaeologist's son. I work with the ASI, so there's one Haji Javed Khanji, who's retired as director, and he was posted in Kashmir. And this whole problem about the water going into Pakistan, he says, you know, India is so surplus plastic, we don't know what to do with it. Why doesn't the government just take it to the border, near the river, and just dump it in the river where it's going? So it was a very, from a child, coming from a college student, you know. So just, I mean, let me share it.
Anshuman Tripathi. So pretty good presentation. The Honorable Prime Minister also mentioned recently that in many of the dams, we only had 2% storage of water. And because of the silting process, the dams were pretty full. Now, I looked up on the internet, it takes about a few years to desilt our dam completely. So, but when the desilting process happens, it creates a lot of problems for the ecosystem downstream. So, when we talk about the process of cleaning water, giving and having the desilting process, that can be weaponized in strong ways going forward. Your comments are appreciated, sir.
Okay, so we conclude the second round of questioning. Now, please.
Thank you, Prabhat, for those kind words. Like, again, Prabhat's words should be taken with a pinch of salt. We go back a very long time also, like Arvind and myself. And, you know, I know you are always way ahead of me. But this is an area, you know, you're right in a sense that this is clean and cut, denouncing it. And this is what originally one had also thought about. But always there will be, and we've seen it, pressures, and you can achieve the same end. Because what is abeyance? That's your query. What is abeyance? As I take it, it is suspension. The treaty actually doesn't exist. And you can do what you wish now, and we have started doing it. Already, the flow data, etc., has stopped. We have engaged, I believe, in some flushing operations. We have stopped stuff, and there have been reports about it. And this will continue, and it will continue at a higher pace. You will have developmental works which will take place. So I say if you can achieve, and I admire the sophistication of people from other provinces in India when they are not as direct as us. If you can achieve that end, my goal is, am I achieving my goal if it minimizes pressures? I think it does. And therefore, I would go for it. On your zero personnel, I'm more or less agreement there. That I have long advocated it. I've lost a lot. You know, Pakistan has lost me a lot of friends because a lot of my colleagues in the Foreign Service, barring one or two notable exceptions like you, don't like me very much because of my views. So I blame Pakistan for that. But I have always felt these missions serve very little purpose. Not only are we under much greater pressure in Pakistan, because I've been there twice. I was there from 69 till almost the conflict of 71. And then later from 95 to 98 in different stations, first in Karachi and then Islamabad. And yes, not only particularly the relatively lower level officers and staff, it's not only pressure, it's life-threatening. When I was there, one of the people in my embassy high commission was stabbed. And when Sati Lama was there, I think it was the first secretary who was tortured, actually tortured. So that is the way they deal with things. When I was there in my earlier innings, which is 69 to 71, they did beat up one or two guys. But at that time, we did tit for tat reactions. So I felt actually reasonably safe because I knew that some consolation that if they picked me up and did something, I was then a second secretary, that their second secretary some second secretary would get the same treatment, and that was a deterrent. When I went back as High Commissioner, I took this up with the then Prime Minister. After we had discussed some other issues, I said, our morale is down. I said, what is your solution? So I said, I have only one thing to fall back upon, the experience of 69-71, which is tit for tat. यानी कि एक बात तोड़ोगे तो एक रात टूटेगी कहीं और. So he said, we are too civilized for that. So I said, in that case, I can suggest some alternatives, which I said, but they are not effective, which was PNGs actually, which we did. But he said, we are too civilized for that. So, but that is not, Arvind used the right word this morning in another session. It's not a normal country. So Pakistan will always be a problem. In terms of, the question of holding water and Seni, as you were saying, leaving water, that I think we have done, but it's much more than that. Remember, water scarce, we are water scarce too. Pakistan is much more water scarce. So even a 5% diminution which you do will cause injury. There are already problems in Sindh over the Cholistan project. So these are things. The World Bank role, someone asked that, clearly mischievous. I mean, that is reason enough for us to get out of this treaty. And now the World Bank doesn't really have a role because it's in abeyance, which means it's suspended. तो कुछ नहीं हो सकता. And Pakistan will keep crying, it will go international, it will do, but it's a crybaby, it will continue to do that. ठीक है. I think that was about it. That's all I can recall.
So thank you very much, sir. We had a very interesting discussion. In fact, the figure that was quoted in our media and other places, which we took it as almost gospel, was that we were letting about 2 MAF go into Pakistan from our eastern rivers.
Right. We will remember.
But I came across a parliament question answered in Pakistan, in the assembly there. Actually, this figure is about 4 MAF. So they are very happy. And it is done by one of their ministers. In fact, I wrote a little article also. It must be there somewhere. I can't. So the amount of water that we have given them has been huge. And if you actually, आप कितना पानी देते हैं, for your daily, if you just put 1/10 of that and put water, 4 MAF is a huge amount. But I think the problem has been that I'm talking of now the eastern rivers, that the Shahpur Kandi and other dams, etc., we've not been able to build in time. And I do not know what is the progress now. Perhaps there's some progress now. But also at the border, if you look at Ravi and way it meanders, once I had gone on the border and I saw that in about 50 kilometers, it enters 22 times. In and out. It goes there, comes back, because we have a fence there, etc. And given the density of population on our side, and which is cultivating, in fact, even beyond the fence. So they were all wanting that water. So how do you handle that on the ground? So that was one problem. The second problem was that you remember we were arguing at that point of time of desilting the canals, repairing the gates, and giving additional water to Rajasthan, so that the water could be diverted. And there was essentially bloodbath in our meetings between the engineers and the people of Rajasthan, Punjab, Haryana, etc. Brigadier Saab is here. He wrote an article this morning also. And even today, the Satluj-Yamuna link is not operational, and it is doubtful whether it will ever become operational. So I think what we have done, that's the international aspect is what we discussed. But I think we have to, the domestic aspect also. How do we suddenly, of course, it's a lot of water will become available and we should be able to use it. And that won't happen unless, you see, this leave and leave store, etc. is to do with Pakistan. But what do we do with on our side? That is also storage.
Absolutely right. I think we have been very, actually you were doing a lot of work on this in 2016, 17, 18 also, to try and ensure that we maximize our utilization of the eastern rivers. And that's what during Prakram one learned is from the army. The engineers had told us that there is water that is just flowing from the eastern rivers. They showed us photographs. And then we got the irrigation department into the act, and we got clearances done for a number of projects to be done to increase this. And on the western rivers, some projects, actually some, you know it better because you were dealing with this from NSA.
So thank you very much. I think we'll continue with these discussions. So let's give a hand to. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, we are having another Vimarsh very shortly on the 3rd June. And this will be in Operation Sindoor, a helicopter view by Gurmurtiji. So please come for that. Yeah. I think it's been, we have sent out the, what is this? Yeah. Please. Take care, Khalid.
सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Another one more Vimarsh.